My name is Vivian, and even though I'm 29 now, sometimes I feel like my life has stalled, somewhere between childhood memories of endlessly yearning for recognition from those closest to me, and today, when that recognition remains elusive. I want to tell you about my family, but to be honest, it's more accurate to say it's about the moment I realized I didn't really have one in the sense I should have. It all started with simple little things, but they were the very foundation of that feeling of emptiness I've carried for far too long. Now I work as a financial analyst at a large company in the heart of the city, and frankly, I truly love what I do. I enjoy delving into details, finding solutions, feeling like my work is important and delivers results, and all of this pays well enough that I don't have to worry about tomorrow. But it wasn't always this way. 3 years ago, I was stuck in a mid-level position at a bank, days stretching into months, and months into years, and I watched my ambitions slowly wither away because I had nowhere to go, as if I were stuck in a traffic jam with no chance of gaining momentum. And then, as happens in life when everything seems hopeless, an opportunity arose, a new opening at a respected company, and I took it, almost without hesitation, like jumping into cold water, not knowing if I'd make it to shore. And yes, it turned out to be the best decision I ever made. For the first time, I felt like I was moving in the direction I'd always dreamed of, that I could be a strong and independent woman, building a career on my own terms. But with my family, things were different, and this different became almost unbearable over the years. My parents were in their late 50s, always living together in their own house. My older sister, Emma, was 32, with her husband, Dave, and 8-year-old son, Tyler, who had practically taken up residence in my parents' living room, being there almost every day. I lived on the other side of town and visited only once every few months, and every time I stepped through the door, I seemed to be stopped by the same thought. They didn't even notice I was gone. I tried to ignore it, but I increasingly felt like an extra in someone else's play, where the lead role had long been reserved for Emma. Family conversations flowed on as usual. Emma's new interests, how Tyler was coping at school, how Dave was doing at the workshop, all discussed for hours with detail, passionate concern, and pressing questions. But if anyone did mention me, it was only in mere snippets like, "Oh yeah, Vivian works at a bank, I think." And I realized they hadn't even bothered to find out what I really did for a living. They were still convinced I was renting a tiny apartment and sitting still, even though my life had long since changed. And, the most painful thing was that it had always been that way. As a child, Emma was the golden child, to whom no one could or would compare. When she got her driver's license, her parents threw a real celebration with balloons and cake, and when I brought mine 2 years later, they simply forgot. And only after I reminded them the next day did they nod indifferently. When Emma unexpectedly became pregnant at 23, she suddenly became that special daughter who had given them their first grandchild, and this fact immediately eclipsed everything else. That was the year I graduated from college with honors, and it should have been a momentous occasion, a proud moment, but my parents were late to my ceremony because they were helping Emma decorate her nursery. I stood on stage, receiving my diploma, and out of the corner of my eye I caught the empty spaces they'd left for themselves, and it was worse than any indifferent word. And they never even tried to hide the fact that this was the norm for them. For them, the center of the universe was always Emma, her problems, her achievements, her life. And for years, I thought it was my fault, that maybe if I tried harder, if I did something outstanding, they'd finally notice they had another daughter, that I was important too. 3 years ago, I decided that this was my chance, that they would finally hear me and see me. I was so happy with this new job, I felt like I'd taken a huge step forward, and I desperately wanted to share this moment with them. I imagined how happy they would be, how they would say they were proud of me, how for the first time in a long time it would not be about Emma, but about me. I even approached it with a special kind of trepidation. I went to the bakery, chose a beautiful chocolate cake with delicate icing and delicate chocolate figures, bought a bottle of good wine so we could toast a new beginning that evening, and went to my parents' house on Saturday. I walked into the house and smelled coffee and fried pancakes, and my heart sank. Emma and Dave were already sitting at the table, Tyler running around, and I thought, perfect, everyone's here. I set the cake and wine on the kitchen counter with a kind of trepidation, as if opening a gift for them, and my mother looked at me with slight bewilderment and asked, "Why did you bring cake, dear?" I sat at the table trying to even out my breathing and felt my heart pounding faster, as if I were preparing to jump from a height rather than to talk with my closest loved ones. I took a deep breath and said, "Well, guys, I'd like to celebrate something with you. I have some really good news about work." And the moment the words left my lips, and I was already waiting for any hint of attention, for the silence in which my parents and sister listened to me, all I could think was, "Oh my God, guys, is this really going to work out?" But Emma cut me off abruptly, her voice drowning out mine, almost jumping out of her chair with anticipation, and I felt this fragile moment, the one I'd brought cake and wine for, slipping from my grasp. "Dave and I have been so excited to share our news with you," she exclaimed, and just like that, the entire room's attention shifted, as if I hadn't even started speaking. Emma beamed, her eyes sparkling, and began to explain how she and Dave had decided to take a bold step, opening their own business, a car wash. Her voice was so confident and enthusiastic that everyone around her immediately joined in, not even noticing what I was trying to say. She talked about how they'd already found a location, how they were negotiating a loan, and how this wouldn't just be a job, but a true adventure. Then, as if securing her place in the spotlight, Emma waved her hand toward my cake and bottle of wine and said, "Now's the perfect time. We can use this to celebrate our big announcement." Dave immediately jumped on board, explaining his business plan with such enthusiasm that it sounded like he was presenting to investors rather than sitting at his parents' table. Tyler, for his part, was fired up by the idea, and with childlike innocence, asked if he could help wash cars because he thought it would be fun. Meanwhile, Emma and Dave were bombarded with questions about the location, about the loans, about how they were planning to set everything up, and their voices were filled with genuine curiosity and interest. And so, to the approving glances of my parents, they opened my wine, they cut my cake, and everyone around them laughed and discussed the details of the future car wash. And I just sat and watched it all, feeling a heaviness building inside me. Everything I'd brought to celebrate my achievement had become props for Emma's dream party. I sat there for over an hour listening to them make plans, discuss their prospects, and rejoice. And during that entire time, no one once asked me why I'd brought the cake and wine. No one even remembered that I'd started talking about the news. I was just there, almost invisible, almost unnecessary. When I finally stood up and quietly excused myself, saying I had to go, they barely looked up to say goodbye. That evening, back in my apartment, I sat in silence for a long time, feeling a firm resolve dawning within me. I wouldn't do this anymore. I wouldn't try to win their attention again and again to remind them of myself, to appeal to their interest that never quite awakened. If they weren't interested in my life, so be it. I wouldn't allow myself to hope anymore. Time passed, and I kept my resolve. 6 months ago, I bought my first apartment, went through the entire registration process, signed the papers at the bank with trembling hands, then threw a housewarming party for friends and colleagues, and it was incredible. For the first time, I felt like I had my own corner, my own space, but I didn't tell my family. Last month, I went on vacation to the Maldives, and it was the best trip of my life. Clear water, white sand, food that seemed like a gift from heaven, and every day I caught myself thinking that for the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy. And again, not a single photo on social media, not a word to my family. I realized a simple truth. When you stop expecting people to care about you, you stop suffering from the fact that they don't. But yesterday, something happened that made my heart beat faster than ever. I got promoted. And not just any promotion, I'm now the head of one of the financial analysis departments, and at 29, I'm the youngest department head in the company's history. When my boss, the CFO, the same man who had hired me away from the bank 3 years ago, invited me into his office and told me I deserved it, I felt like I'd finally achieved what I'd been working toward for years. And for the first time since that day when I brought the cake and wine, I wanted to celebrate with my family. This time, not quietly, not casually, but for real. I decided to throw a party, a real one, with music, guests, and yes, I invited my family. Last night I opened our family chat and wrote a message. "Hi everyone. I'm having a promotion party at my house next Saturday at 7 p.m. Hope to see you there." Emma replied first, and I reread her words twice, as if I couldn't believe they were exactly what she'd decided to write. "Sorry, Vivian, but Dave and I already have plans for this Saturday. We're taking Tyler hiking. Maybe next time." I stared at the screen and couldn't help but chuckle. Hiking, really? Emma, who always complained even about the air conditioning in restaurants being too strong and ruining her evening, suddenly seemed ready to venture into the wilderness, where there was no hot shower, no soft bed, and no food to order. But I just sighed and said to myself, "Okay, maybe my parents will come. They're retired now. They rarely have any plans on the weekend, and I hoped that at least they would want to be there for this important day." About 20 minutes passed, and then the phone vibrated again. This time, it was my mother. I opened the message and read, "Vivian, I already told the book club girls they could come to our monthly meeting on Saturday. I've been planning this for weeks. You really should have told us ahead of time. You always dump everything on us at the last minute." I stared at those lines for a full 5 minutes, and my heart sank. I'd given them 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks. And since when did I always bombard them with my news? I barely tell them anything. I hide even the most important events, and suddenly I'm being accused of thinking only of myself. But the most painful part was the next message. "Your dad and I won't be able to make it either. You know how important my book club is to me, but you're so inattentive with your timing. You only think about yourself, Vivian." These words hit me like a powerful punch to the gut, and I even whispered out loud, "I only think about myself." And here I was, finally achieving what I'd been working toward for so many years, finally achieving true success, and all I wanted was to share the joy with my family. And now they were making it clear to me that my desire to celebrate with them was selfish. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone screen, waiting for something else to come through, something that would soften the blow a little. But there were no more messages. And then I suddenly felt, not sadness, not despair, not the crushing disappointment that always washed over me in such situations, but a strange, almost tangible clarity, as if a puzzle had finally come together inside me. Everything became crystal clear. I typed a short reply. "No problem. I completely understand. Enjoy your plans." And with that, I concluded. I didn't argue, didn't try to convince them otherwise, didn't point out how important it was to me. Because what's the point? They'd already made it clear where my success fits in their worldview. The irony was that I hadn't even had time to tell them my new address. I'd planned to do that after they confirmed they were coming, and now what's the point? They don't need it since they're not going to show up. And then I threw myself into party preparations. I called one of my favorite restaurants downtown and ordered a full set, gourmet appetizers, main courses, desserts, everything to make my guests feel special. I scheduled a cleaning for Friday night, so the apartment would sparkle and every detail would be in its place. I stocked up on good wine, beer, and even soft drinks for those who prefer not to drink. My friend Jessica promised to bring a professional camera to capture the evening, and my colleague Mike immediately volunteered to help with furniture arrangements and table settings. Even my boss said he would be happy to come, and frankly, that meant a lot more to me than any words of approval from my family, which I never got. The week flew by. I was working, busy with the little details of preparation, thinking about the guests, and I caught myself barely remembering that my family hadn't come. I was too busy, too excited about the upcoming celebration with those who truly mattered. Then Saturday arrived, and I dedicated the entire day to preparation. I did my hair beautifully, put on that dress that made me feel like a strong and confident woman, and arranged the apartment so that everything looked perfect, so that everyone who walked through the door would feel the festive atmosphere. The food arrived on time, the dishes were sumptuously presented, the tables looked like they belonged in a luxury magazine. I glanced around my apartment filled with light and the scents of fresh flowers and exquisite treats, and caught myself thinking, I felt good, really good. At precisely 7 o'clock, guests began arriving, and every minute filled my apartment with a light and warmth I honestly hadn't felt in so long. Jessica was the first to arrive, beaming with her smile and handing me a huge bouquet of bright flowers, the scent of which instantly filled the room. I hugged her tightly, gratefully, as if in that moment she were closer to me than anyone else. Mike and his girlfriend followed, then a few more colleagues, and soon the door was open. Friends from college would drop in, then someone would bring someone else, and gradually my house came alive with the sounds of laughter, light conversation, and joyful noise. By 8 o'clock, the atmosphere had become festive in the truest and most sincere sense of the word. Glasses clinked, tables groaned with food, guests told stories, some laughed until they cried, and in all this noise I suddenly realized one simple truth. No one, absolutely no one, asked me where my family was. These people knew me well enough to understand that if they weren't around, there was a good reason, and there was no need to discuss it, because something else was more important, being with me, celebrating my success. Around 9, my boss, tall, always a little reserved, but clearly pleased that evening, stood up with a glass of wine and gestured for everyone to be quiet. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, and the whole room instantly fell silent, and he began looking directly at me, and his words sank into my heart so deeply that I had to blink several times to keep from bursting into tears. "Vivian, you've thoroughly earned this promotion. In the 3 years since I lured you away from that bank, you've not only met but exceeded every expectation I had. You're dedicated to your work, you're incredibly talented, and you have a rare gift, seeing solutions where others see only problems." I felt something stir inside me because no one in my family had ever spoken of me like that, with such genuine pride, such respect. He continued, "And what makes this even more special is that Vivian is now the youngest department head in the history of our company. At 29, she's achieved what many people only achieve in their 40s or 50s. I couldn't be prouder to have her on our team." At that moment, the room erupted in applause. Someone even cried out in delight, and I couldn't help but wipe away the tears. But they were tears of happiness, long awaited, genuine. He didn't stop there, however. This promotion, of course, comes with a significant salary increase. And frankly, Vivian deserves every penny. I have no doubt that next time we'll celebrate her success in the luxurious home she'll buy with all this new money. And then everyone burst into laughter, applause, and joyful cheers again. Jessica had her phone ready and filmed everything, and I knew I wanted to cherish this moment forever, because it symbolized that I was finally among people who saw and appreciated me. After the boss's speech, the toast continued. Sarah, my close friend, said she was proud to know me, that she'd always admired my strength and determination. Mike couldn't resist joking that one day I'd be the boss of us all, which sparked another round of laughter. That evening, everything was perfect, absolutely perfect, as if the world itself had decided to prove to me that I was worthy of this recognition and love. The party lasted until almost midnight. People didn't want to leave, and I seized every moment. We talked about work, about life, about dreams. We laughed, we shared memories, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly celebrated, that I truly belonged, that I was finally seen. The next morning, I woke up with a surprising sense of lightness. I got up, made myself a coffee, and sipped it as I started cleaning the apartment. For the first time in months, I felt like posting something on social media. Why not share this happiness with the world? I thought. I selected a few photos Jessica had taken, including a video of my boss's speech, and wrote, "Grateful to everyone who came to celebrate my promotion to department head." I couldn't ask for better friends and colleagues. Officially, the youngest department head in the company's history. I still can't believe it. I put my phone away and spent a couple of hours cleaning up after the party, playing soft music, enjoying the silence and that strange but pleasant satisfaction of a well-spent celebration. It wasn't until around noon that I glanced at my phone again and almost dropped it. 37 missed calls were on the screen. Mom, Dad, Emma, Dave, Mom again, Emma again, over and over. The call started around 10 in the morning and didn't stop until I finally picked up at noon. I didn't call back, and the longer I held the phone face down, the more this strange feeling of power, and at the same time, a slight weariness grew within me, as if all the cards had finally been laid out and there was no longer any need to pretend I was waiting. Instead, I opened our family chat, and damn it, the first thing I saw was a long message from Mom. "Vivian, honey, I just saw your post. I had no idea you worked at Morrison Financial. It's such a prestigious company." And then, as if from behind the scenes, Dad appeared. "I'm so proud of you, honey." Being a department head at your age is incredible. And of course, Emma couldn't resist. "Oh my God, Vivian, why don't you tell me how you bought the apartment? It looks amazing in the video." Then Dave, short and to the point, "Congratulations on your promotion." "You're absolutely amazing." And then Emma again, "Seriously, when did you move in?" "Your apartment looks so great." And the final touch from Mom, "We should have been there to celebrate with you." I'm so sorry we missed such a special evening. I laughed out loud, sitting alone in my perfectly clean apartment. I laughed so hard I started to cry, not from joy, but from this bitter, gnawing absurdity. Where, I wondered, was all that enthusiasm a week ago when I invited them to the party? Where was this interest in my life over the past 3 years as I climbed step by step toward this very success? But the most amazing thing was that the messages didn't stop there. They kept coming, literally, as I was reading. Emma wrote, "Vivian, you have to tell us everything. I can't believe you kept all this from us." Mom added, "Your boss seems so nice, and what he said about a raise, you must be doing great." And Dad, as if wanting to cement his new image as a caring father, wrote, "We need to meet soon so you can tell us everything. We're so eager to hear about your successes." I watched these words and felt like a bystander watching some strange spectacle. It was as if standing before me weren't Mom, Dad, and sister, but 3 complete strangers who were suddenly pretending to be my family. Warm, attentive, proud people. Where the hell had they been all my life? I slammed the chat window shut without replying and returned to my usual routine. It was Sunday, and I was doing simple adult things, doing laundry, grocery shopping, preparing meals for the week. These were things I did myself and always had, because I'm a grown woman and I don't need anyone's approval, especially theirs. But I wasn't given silence. All week long, the calls didn't stop. My phone vibrated during the day, rang in the evening, and even at night, I woke up to new voicemails on my answering machine. "Vivian, it's Mom. Please call me back. I want to hear all about your job and your beautiful apartment." Then Emma's voice, so cloyingly sisterly, "Hi, it's Emma. I'm so sorry we didn't know about your promotion. Call me back. I want to celebrate with you. Maybe we can go shopping." And finally, Dad, "Vivian, Mom and I are so proud of you. We had no idea you were doing so well. Call us back, please." I listened to them all to the end without turning any of them off and still didn't answer. And the more I listened, the more clearly I heard Jessica's voice in my head. "Now that they know you have money and status, you've suddenly become interesting to them." It was true. Suddenly, I became important to them, not as a daughter, not as a sister, not as a person, but as a symbol of wealth and success. The messages kept pouring in. Mom kept asking for my address so she could come visit. Emma wanted to know when exactly I bought the apartment and how I'd managed to afford it. And Dad, for some reason, started sending me links to articles about my company, as if he always followed financial news. Honestly, it was pathetic. Pathetic and hurtful. As if they seriously thought I'd give in to their sudden interest and believe they genuinely cared. Did they really think I wouldn't notice the obvious? Their affection was now directly tied to my salary and new status? By Friday, they were clearly despairing because my mother sent a huge, almost confessional message. "Vivian, I don't understand why you haven't responded. We are your family, and we love you. We want to be part of your success and celebrate with you. Please don't push us away." I stared at the screen and almost lost it. I was just shy of writing, "You had so many opportunities to be a part of my life and celebrate with me, but you chose not to." But I stopped myself in time. I knew. What was the point? I stood in the middle of my living room, still in my soft pajamas, a mug of cold coffee on the table, and looked at them, at this strange scene. My family, suddenly invading my space with their fake smiles, loud voices, and boxed cake, as if this gesture were enough to erase years of indifference. Emma continued to unceremoniously search my closets and shelves with her eyes, as if checking whether it was really all mine, whether I could really afford this kind of interior, this kind of furniture, this kind of life. I saw her lips press into a thin line as she repeated again, "God, Vivian, this place must have cost a fortune." And there was no admiration or support in her voice, only envy and bewilderment. I took a deep breath and spoke slowly, clearly, as if each word were a stone I had finally decided to put back in place. "The truth is, Emma, you know nothing about my life. You don't know how much I make. You don't know when I moved here. You didn't even know what company I worked for." I looked up at Mom and added, "You're all only here because you saw a video where my boss said a few words about my salary." Dad raised his hands as if trying to reconcile everyone and said, "Well, Vivian, that's not fair. We're here because we're proud of you." I laughed, harshly, loudly, with such bitterness that I was surprised where the energy came from. Proud? Where was that pride last week? Where was it 3 years ago when I got this job? Where was it 6 months ago when I bought this house? Emma snorted and, as always, tried to shift the blame. "You never told us you bought a house." I looked at her and replied coldly, "I didn't tell us because you didn't even ask." The room fell silent. Even Emma stopped moving. Tyler sat on the couch, looking like he wanted to vanish into thin air, and I suddenly felt sorry for him. A child caught in this whirlwind of family drama, unable to understand why adults couldn't behave normally. Mom was the first to break the silence, clearing her throat and quietly saying, "Vivian, I think you're being unfair. We've always taken care of you." I looked straight into her eyes and felt my heart beat faster. "No, Mom. You've always taken care of Emma." I took a step forward and the words poured out of me, hot, heavy, long restrained. "Remember how 3 years ago I came to you with cake and wine to tell you about my new job?" Emma interrupted me with her story about some car wash, and you all spent the evening celebrating with my cake and my wine, while I sat there, invisible. Emma's face turned pink. She looked away but still weakly protested. "That's not quite true." Her voice wavered and I realized she remembered it all perfectly well. "It is," I said firmly, "and it's been happening my whole life. Emma's engagement, Emma's wedding, Emma's pregnancy, Emma's new house, Emma's business. It was always about you, Emma, and I was just a spare daughter who showed up when you needed an extra audience." Mom looked genuinely shocked, as if she were hearing her own mistakes for the first time. "Vivian," she said in a trembling voice, "you're our daughter, too." "We love you." I clenched my fists, barely keeping myself from screaming, and quietly but clearly said, "Love? Do you understand what it means to love someone? It means being interested in their life. It means being there when they ask. It means appreciating their accomplishments, even if they don't involve money. It means being there not just when it's convenient, but always. And at that moment, I felt the air in the room grow heavy, as if the walls had also heard my words and finally released all the tension that had been building there for years. I walked to the door and, without a second's hesitation, opened it wide to let them know the conversation was over. "I think it's time for you to go," I said in an even voice, trying not to show how much my hands were shaking. Mom, clutching a box of cake and a bottle of wine, suddenly burst into tears, burying her face in a napkin, her shoulders shaking. "Vivian, you're breaking up our family," she said, frantically gathering the things she'd brought back into the bag. "We're trying to reach you, and you're so cruel." I remained silent, but Emma, as always, decided to have the last word. She walked past me toward the door, her heels clicking loudly on my floor, when she suddenly stopped, turned to me, and looked me straight in the eye. "You know what your problem is, Vivian?" she said with a caustic smile. "You've always been jealous of me. Mom and Dad always loved me more, and you can't stand it. And now that you have money, you think you're better than us." I felt my lips stretch into a smile, not an angry one, but rather a tired one, and I replied quietly, "Emma, I don't envy you. I pity you. You're 32 years old and you still need Mom and Dad's approval to feel even remotely good about yourself, and I don't need that anymore." Dad was the last to leave. He paused in the doorway, sighed heavily, and said in his low, tired voice, "Vivian, you're making a mistake. Family is important." I looked at him, pressed my lips together, and nodded. "You're right, Dad. Family really is important. That's why I won't pretend we're one anymore." And without waiting for an answer, I closed the door right in his face and immediately turned the key in the lock. I rested my forehead against the cool wooden surface and felt an incredible weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I told them everything I really thought, without fear, without trying to smooth things over, without the usual desire to earn their approval. The following months became a time of amazing relief and inner freedom for me. I threw myself into my work and, for the first time, felt not just coping, but truly good at leadership. My team respected me, projects were going well, and my name even appeared in the company newsletter as a rising star to watch. I went on dates, and it was easy and joyful because I no longer felt like I had to hide my joys or explain them to anyone. I bought expensive things and felt no guilt about it. I traveled whenever I wanted, without approval or excuses, and lived exactly the way I'd always dreamed. My family tried to get in touch the whole time. Emma left passive-aggressive posts on Facebook about how painful it was when family members turned away from the people who loved them, but I read them and remained silent, because there was neither love nor truth in those words. My mother texted me several times, asking me to come over for dinner, talk, and work things out, but I deleted them without even replying. And then, about 4 months after that scene at my house, on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone suddenly started ringing and vibrating nonstop. It was my mother, 5 calls in a row. I didn't want to pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. I pressed the green button and immediately her worried, broken voice came on the line. "Vivian, thank God you answered. I need to talk to you about Emma." I tensed. "What's wrong with Emma?" I asked coldly. "She's in trouble, dear." "Big trouble. The car wash business is failing, and they owe the bank a huge amount. They could lose everything." I listened silently, knowing she was about to say the main thing. And sure enough, Mom didn't disappoint. "Vivian, I know you're doing well financially right now, but Emma really needs help. Could you lend her a little to save the business?" I closed my eyes and uttered only one word. "No." Mom begged, "Vivian, please. She's your sister. That's what family does, help each other." I chuckled. "Mom, you're right. That's exactly what family does. But you've made it clear to me that I'm not part of your family. Emma has made it even clearer. So no, I won't give her any money." My mom's voice broke. "But Vivian, if you don't help her, they could lose their home." "She needs to think about the child." I gritted my teeth and said firmly, "It's not my problem." Emma decided to start her own business. Emma took out the loan herself. Emma put her family's financial security at risk. It's her choice, not mine. And then my mother burst into tears, right into the phone, sobbing, "Vivian, how can you be so heartless? We're talking about your nephew." I felt my heart turn to stone and replied, "Tyler is not my responsibility. He's Emma and Dave's son, and apparently yours, since you're so worried about them." I hung up and a void remained in my chest, but also a firm calm, as if I'd finally cut the last threads tying me to their expectations and endless manipulation. An hour later, a new notification flashed on my phone screen, and I immediately knew who it was from. A message from Emma. I opened it and saw these lines. "Vivian, you are a terrible person. You were always jealous because Mom and Dad loved me more. Now you have money, but you can't even help your family. I hope you're happy being single." I reread the words, felt the corners of my lips lift, and laughed softly, as if all she could think of was to accuse me of jealousy again, to portray herself as the favorite, and me as cold and envious. I deleted the message without the slightest twinge of remorse. She still didn't understand, still living in that imaginary picture where her superiority explained all other failures. 3 months passed, and one day over coffee with mutual friends, I learned the news I'd honestly been waiting for. Emma and Dave had completely lost their car wash business. They couldn't pay off their bank debts, and they had to sell their house to cover the bills. Now they were living in my parents' house, all 4 of them, Mom, Dad, Emma, and Dave, under the same roof again, like they had been when I was a child. The irony was that it was where I'd once dreamed of growing up and running away to start my own life, and yet they seemed to have come full circle and returned. And, as it turned out, Mom was now telling anyone who would listen that it was all my fault. She whispered to neighbors and relatives that I was cruel, selfish, that I'd turned my back on my family when they needed me most. I learned that she'd told our neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, that I'd forgotten where I came from and let money turn me into a terrible person. Do you know what I felt? Nothing. No pain, no regret, no familiar twinge of guilt. I truly realized I didn't care. Everything they said about me no longer had any power over me. I'm 31 now. 6 months ago, I received another promotion and am now a senior director, just a stone's throw from the very top of the company. Last month, I bought a house. A real house. Not an apartment, but a spacious place with a green yard, a veranda where you can drink your morning coffee, and the garden I dreamed of as a teenager. I'm dating a wonderful man from work, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm not just a background figure, a shadow or a backup plan, but the center of attention. Someone who is valued and cherished. I have friends who rejoice in my victories as if they were their own, who come to me when I'm down, and who stay without asking for anything in return. Sometimes I think back to that day 3 years ago when, full of hope and excitement, I brought cake and wine to share the news of my new job, and they, without even looking at me, used it all to celebrate Emma's success. Back then, I felt empty, unnoticed, unwanted. Now I think it was the best gift of fate, because it was then that I first saw who they really were. They're not villains, no. They're just people who care only when it benefits them, who love those who make them feel needed and turn away from those who don't play by their rules. They loved Emma because she constantly demanded their participation, their decisions, their control. They tried to win me back when they thought I could solve their financial woes. But I learned something important, a truth that perhaps must be lived to be believed. You can't force people to love you the way you need them to love you. You can't make them see your value if they've decided you're worthless. You can't force them to put you first if they've spent their whole lives keeping you at the bottom of their list. All you can do is find those who already see you, who celebrate your victories because your joys matter to them, who show up for you when you're struggling, not for recognition or profit, but because they truly love you. Now I have such people. And frankly, I've never been happier. Let my family keep its drama, its reproaches, and its conditional love, and I will keep my peace, my freedom, my success, and my new, chosen family, those who truly care.